Same generation? Most people come here and and power cords don't work. Well, I do this enough, I just bring my own cords. What is it? Oh, all right. Yeah, I got my executive. And then it's going to want you to sign. So, the main one is product management. I just didn't skip on the right.
Yeah, I was the tail end of it.
Skip it down. Because it turns out if you try to log in on your Facebook page, it sees the Facebook login coming in from
I mean, they're both.
You've not logged in to Reno before, have you? So it's really here. Facebook streams on it.
Like you have been sitting in there for 8 hours. Because that our class was yeah, no, that's one speak that's going to so it's 16 hours of segregation. I like getting all this.
Half of our business.
The reason why I use the PowerPoint is because the Gmail one doesn't have design.
There's two big sides. One is they already have and then there's the property management side, which integrated as they manage their business.
Yeah, we have the same machine, so you can just plug right into what I got. Yeah. You can even use my PowerPoint.
So you're saying I should stick to Google or change?
Whatever it is that you like.
Okay.
And what I do is I put these up. Because these things have hit slides. And I give you patience.
You want to go through your slide first?
Yeah.
Retail managers, they
All right, thank you everyone for coming. Let's get settled out, guys. All right, thank you all for coming. Has anyone here not heard of Product School before? Okay, a couple. Cool. So Product School is a part-time product management training school. We have we're in data coding. We have it says blockchain. I think we actually deprecated blockchain recently. We're all over this country, and now we've expanded into Toronto, London, and of course most of our products are now online. If you're not part of the Slack channel for us, go ahead and join it. A lot of interesting things, including an AMA every Tuesday. And if you miss the AMAs, they also then post the links to where you can go see the discussions. There's also in there a thing about jobs. So I assume that's of interest to a lot of you. But usually the product managers on there, I mean, these are the companies that a lot of them work for. So you want to be in good company. Right now we're over 10,000 alumni have graduated across 14 different campuses, including online. The main courses start off as product management. These are the basic skills that you'll need to be a product manager, and also helps answer the question, well, what have you managed? If you've never managed a product before, you're in a tight spot. right? So the usual way to do that is to get a side project and try to run that through as far as you can. But if you don't have an idea for a side project and you want to come up with something, the product management class is a great way to do that because you will come up with a product, and together with the team, you'll actually code it, you'll put it together, and you might even birth it. It also goes on your resume, and a lot of companies are recognizing this as a great way to say, okay, at least I know the basics. They're not hiring a newbie in this particular role. If you don't know how to code, not all of us are coders, and I'm personally quite terrible at it, knowing at least the language of coders, and knowing some of the not just the jargons, but also some of the technical knowledge along the lines of saying, well, if I'm just coding a UI, that's an afternoon's work for most people. But if I need to do something that does a complex AI algorithm that figures out all these different properties and puts them all together and so on, well, that's going to take a lot longer than an afternoon, and you need to know that. If you're helping to design the plan that says, I need to have this done by 4, and your coders are like, no way. You need to know if they're blowing smoke at you. You know, are they really saying no way because, you know, that really is technically difficult to do, or are they saying it because they just don't particularly feel like doing it at this moment because they don't like you? There's a lot of different answers there. Some of the jobs that are out there require you to have good data analytics skills. If you don't know your SQL from SQL, well, then you probably shouldn't be in one of those roles. If you know how to do web analytics and you've got your SQL searches down and you can do this stuff cold, and you have that on the resume, that's going to peel you off to a certain group of these jobs that are out there. That's the main asset that they're looking for. Other ones are more soft, and by soft I mean it's all about marketing. And this, sometimes you need to know, well, the world of digital marketing. I got my MBA back in 2004, and the world's changed a lot since then. So the digital marketing concepts of today didn't exist back then. So people like me have to go and brush up on how to do marketing in today's age. We also have UX design for product managers. Has anyone here actually gone and sketched out some UX on a whiteboard? Yeah. Have you done it on a computer? Which one's better? What you're doing it on the computer, yeah. Knowing how, at least the language of UX design and what's important and why. There's a lot of discussions between the difference between a product manager and a product owner. And some of that actually comes down to either sign-off or prioritization of the micro-level features. Most people will say that a product manager is going to be more responsible for saying, this is the bigger picture, I want this functionality. And you're less concerned with the details of the UX. But if you move into a product owner role, you'll be very concerned with the UX to make sure that everything's in the right place and the functions of each of the buttons and characters are the exact right things. As you move in the world of product management, though, you're going to go beyond just one product. You might get 2 or 3 or 4 products under your belt. You might actually start having product managers report to you. How do you do that? You can just kind of do it. And if you don't have any skill in that particular category, we'll find out if you're any good at it the hard way. You can also take a product leadership class. And there's a number of companies that are sending their product managers, the senior guys and gals, to take classes like this so that we know how to do leadership as a product manager. We also offer flat-out corporate training. So if you guys know people in larger companies like IBM, if you want to come out and we can actually run classes on your campus and get you to bring your product managers up to speed with what the latest is in the world of product management. Tonight, let me introduce Manoj Bapat. Did I get that right? He's a product manager at IBM. And we'll hand it on off. Thank you.
Hey everyone, hope you can hear me okay. My name is Manoj Bapat. First of all, thank you for coming here this evening. I appreciate you here. I'm very passionate about the field of AI and AI product management. So looking forward to share what I have learned in the last roughly 4 years that I've spent in AI at IBM Watson. And I would like for this session to be very conversational, so please do ask me questions at any point, and would love to respond, and if I cannot, then I'll get back to you, right? So a little bit about me before I get into the topic for today. I'm an engineer by training, started my career at Motorola in the semiconductor industry. All my roles have been in Austin except for the ones that entail like 100% travel. So as an engineer, I used to work on semiconductor chips that were applied to wireless communications and what we know of as our 3G and 4G systems, and now we're getting into 5G. So did that for a while, was spun off as part of the Freescale Semiconductor spun off from Motorola. Continued doing that, and at some point of time, started getting more work that was along the lines of program and product management. So you have a chip coming into market, you have to basically coordinate and strategize on how you take it to market. And so while doing that, decided to pursue my MBA with the intent that I would continue my career in product management in some shape or form. Things took a different turn, ended up doing management consulting for 4.5 years, which actually helped me build some of the skills that I apply in my current role as a product manager. So those used to be typically 4 to 6 months engagements, sometimes even shorter, work mainly with technology customers and worked on their strategic issues, go-to-market strategies, and so forth. And at that point of time, I was looking to get back into tech, into the industry, but having worked with the really long cycles of the semiconductor industry, was looking for something that was more agile, something that was cool and exciting, and happened to find a role over at IBM Watson. And so I joined mid-June in 2015, and have been there and really enjoy the work that I do and the kind of problems that we solve. So let me first start out by highlighting the 3 key takeaways that I hope I provide you as part of this session. The first one is that I want to introduce to you the concept of what AI is in the enterprise. Maybe many of you are already familiar with it. Maybe you have some introduction, maybe not in the enterprise, maybe in some other format. I'd like to highlight the key challenges and opportunities that building products for the enterprise entails. And lastly, I'll share with you what I think is a good journey that enterprises can plan based on my experience working with multiple customers of IBM, and also based on my experience. So I run the Customer Advisory Council for IBM Watson, and I get to hear firsthand the successes as well as the challenges that customers have, how they have learned over time, and how they are deploying AI at scale in their companies. One more note before I dive into the subject matter. So I've tried to I was toying with the idea of should I focus in one specific topic when it comes to enterprise AI, or do I go for breadth? And I figured that this is such a big topic that it made more sense to me to kind of take a broad strokes look at enterprise AI, and perhaps a detailed look at any of those areas maybe in a future session. Right? So to ground us, I would like to start with some working definitions. Consumer products versus enterprise products. So can I have a show of hands of how many of you work with consumer products in some shape or form? Okay. What about enterprise products? All right. So we have a good mix of both. So for our purposes, I think of consumer products as software as the products or services that support our day-to-day needs, right, of an individual user. So the operating word here is that the company that manufactures it sells it to an individual user. And these needs could be everything from your entertainment needs, the way Netflix sells your subscription, to your social media, to the devices that you buy, like the Google Home, or the speakers from Amazon, or whether it's gaming, right? So a different framework, a different mindset. Now, enterprise products, on the other hand, satisfy the needs of organizations. And the kind of needs that they satisfy are tied to the business functions and processes that enterprises have, right? So think of, nothing as glamorous as creating an app that provides you entertainment, but equally essential. That's, compliance, right? Doesn't sound very fun, but if you don't do it right, you can get sued and really, really suffer losses, right? HR, finance, marketing, customer support. So this is what I mean when I talk about enterprise products. So now comes, the more interesting and more philosophical question, right? What is AI? How many of you are familiar with artificial intelligence or AI? Okay, some of you. How many of you have worked on some kind of AI product? Okay, a few of you. And how many of you have worked on enterprise AI products? One of you. Great. So there's a specific reason why I have this picture of this elephant with 5 men around it. Have you heard of the parable or about the 5 blind men and the elephant? Anybody? Okay, so I'll quickly summarize it to provide the context, right? So there are these 5 blind men who had never seen an elephant, had heard about what an elephant is, but never really seen it, right? So one day they happened to come across an elephant, and they all grabbed at the elephant. And one got hold of the leg, one got hold of the tail and the trunk and the back, and each one started saying, "Oh, the elephant is like a tree trunk, right? Because he had grabbed the leg." And somebody grabbed the tail and said the elephant is a rope. And to me, the definition and the understanding of AI is a bit like that parable about the blind man and the elephant. Based on what you have grabbed, people describe AI as that. And so to me, think of my explanation of enterprise AI as what I grabbed of the elephant. All right? So here's the model that I use when I think of AI and concepts like machine learning and deep learning. AI is the ability of a machine or software to have cognitive capabilities similar to human beings. So what do I mean by cognitive capabilities? The ability to see, to listen, to understand, and to reason, to converse in natural language, right? So these are the sentient capabilities that you associate with humans, and I'm going to stay away from general artificial intelligence and all those concepts, but at a very macro level, this is how I think of AI. Machine learning refers to algorithms that detect patterns and make predictions, make recommendations, and they can be thought of as sort of the underlying algorithms that on top of which AI is built, right? And a key part of it is that unlike writing a program and providing explicit instructions, the way machine learning algorithms come up with these recommendations is by detecting patterns in data without being explicitly programmed. Now, that creates a simplistic sense that you just throw data at machine learning algorithms and they produce results, and that's not the case. There's a lot of effort that goes in for these algorithms to work, and that's why machine learning is hard, but that's why machine learning and AI have immense opportunities to impact our lives in many ways. So now, the reason why AI has been in the news for the last maybe at least 5-6 years that I've been involved in it is because of the advances that have been made in machine learning. And lastly, deep learning. So deep learning is a type of machine learning that's based on concepts from electrical engineering called neural networks. And what's special about these is that they require less pre-processing on part of humans to kind of provide that data into the model for it to make predictions and classifications and results along those lines. So now that we have these three definitions together, AI, to be the ability of software to basically see, reason, understand, machine learning, the algorithms that power AI, and then deep learning, a subset within that requires less data and is seen as like the very promising, but also there are detractors or maybe other people with opinions who say that maybe it might hit some kind of ceiling in terms of driving machine learning forward. So I think in the context of the discussion today for enterprise AI, these definitions in my mind should suffice. Any questions at this point? Go ahead.
Just a quick question. Could you,
Yeah.
and if you're going to, then please just tell me and
Yeah.
wait. But could you explain how Watson fits in with this? Is it a platform that runs like Fast AI and PyTorch, or is it its own tool? Does it use a data science stack for Python, or?
Great questions. So I tried to make this particular, because I'm sort of not coming as an IBM person here, but more like talk about the field in general. I didn't get into the specifics of IBM products. There'll be some references here and there, but my thinking and the way I sort of conceptualize this is in the context of what I've learned. And so to answer your question, I don't directly reference Watson here, but maybe we can connect offline, or I can provide you more details and maybe mention some of this as I continue the discussion. But I've tried to keep it more high level, more general. Okay. Any other questions? All right. So enterprise AI is the application of, we are really combining the concepts that we learned earlier, right? Like what's enterprise software and what's AI, and bringing it together. It's the application of AI, machine learning, deep learning to the complex problems that businesses face, with the intent that you want to, why would businesses want to invest in these? Because one, they have an objective that's met by making that effort, right? So whether that's scaling revenues, whether that's increasing employee productivity, whether that's shaping the experience of their customers and providing better care to the customers. So really why enterprises are getting into using AI is because it has the potential and has already done that for folks who have invested the effort, time, and resources into it. Equally important, many enterprises today have access to tons of data. So all of those are the factors, and that's what enterprise AI means. And enterprise AI is a bit different, or I shouldn't say a bit different, it's quite different from, say, the application of AI in consumer applications, because different forms of machine learning, deep learning, or AI have been around, and we have been using them without really knowing what it is, right? For example, today when I was trying to get here and I was emailing Bernard saying, I don't know if I'm going to reach on time because Google has asked me to take a big detour because there was some kind of a, accident on the way. And so they were using some algorithms and models that made that prediction that go by this route. And I went by that. But let's say if I, ended up arriving much later than the original route, it's not like I was going to sue Google, right? I'm a consumer who's using a free product, and I don't know what I share in the bargain, right? But it's quite different when you have enterprise software that you're selling and you have AI within it. And that's some of the points that I will get into the details of as we go further. So some of the catalysts that I touched on, like what's causing all this interest and investment in AI, and why are we seeing progress in this field? So it's the exponential growth in terms of cloud, the compute, the bandwidth, and the networking and the storage that we all have available today. It's the growth of the cloud. All of us are generating data, right? Like it's a cottage industry in terms of like showing different graphics around how much data we produce, whether that's individuals, whether that's enterprises, or whether it's the various devices that we use. And the communication, the whole field of Internet of Things, about the communication that happens between devices. There's tons of data. And so, you can potentially create insights from all this data. So that's like a big driver from, say, ages ago, when machine learning became a field maybe as early as the 1950s, if not earlier. What's driving the acceleration today is all this data that we have available. And there have been multiple algorithmic advances that have taken place. Just today, I think I read in the news that some of the pioneers in this field won the Turing Award that's given to folks, and so folks like Jeff Hinton, Jan LeCun, these are all like the godfathers of AI who are currently working in the field. And so they have made algorithmic advances that has progressed the field. And lastly, there is a strong ecosystem that's developing. So once, any part of the ecosystem for AI, whether that's companies like IBM, who have invested billions of dollars in AI research, as well as coming up with actual products for AI for the enterprise, whether that's the venture capitalist community that's investing in tons of startups to solve problems in many different spaces in AI, whether it's other parts of the ecosystem like companies that do very specific tasks like annotation of data, which is basically marking up the raw data to use as fodder for your models. Like there are companies who exist today whose business models are based on that. And so all these factors have come together. That's kind of driving the AI growth today. So some numbers, right? IDC says that by 2022, the spending on AI systems will increase at 38% CAGR and be as high as almost like $80 billion by 2022. So pretty big numbers. Now, these forecasts have been made consistently. So it's a trend that I've observed in all the time that I've seen, which is a strong indicator that analysts, the market sees, a very positive outlook for AI in general and AI in the enterprise. The other part is that, I think this was done by Gartner, like tremendous value can be generated by AI to the extent of 2.9 trillion in terms of the benefits that AI can derive based on the investments that are being made, right? So really, a huge market. In terms of the applications and industries where AI is applied, like there's a graphic from McKinsey Global Institute. I mean, it's pretty much like almost every industry out there has a potential use case or an application. In my experience, I've worked on with customers and use cases in certain domains like customer care, or have seen the applications in areas like banking, insurance, etc. But in general, you can see like almost every industry has potential and the benefits that it can derive from AI.
Why such a disproportionate indexing on travel?
So I don't know the specific answer as to why travel has so many revenue, such a higher disproportionate number. I'm not familiar with that sector, but my hunch is that, I don't know if it's got to do with the amount of data that's there. It might have to do with the inefficiencies that exist in travel. In the sector, I'm trying to see if they have travel separate from automotive and autonomous vehicles and stuff like that. Probably that's the case, but I don't know the answer as to why that's high, but something to explore. So let's look at like what are the building blocks of enterprise AI. And again, using that blind man and the elephant analogy, I'll kind of share more upfront to your point about what is Watson. So my experience with the AI building blocks is in the context, more on the context of the pre-built APIs and applications that IBM brings to market as part of the Watson platform. So let's look at some of these examples, and maybe then I can explain like how these building blocks come together to build applications.
Before you
go
get
ahead.
there, one of my questions is,
Yeah.
When my company XYZ decides to buy or use one of your AI services, what's to stop the system from then using the learning that it did and the optimizations it did for me for somebody else?
Great question. So different companies have different policies. Speaking based on my observation of IBM's policies, like it is our, it is our strategy and belief that we do not, utilize the training and the data that our customers provide for building their AI models. So we have like we like to call it the 3-layer cake. So there's like the basic model. Let's say if, I'll just make up an example, if the model is for, using what I have here, image recognition. Let's say, and this is actually, we have customers who do that, but there's a customer that uses image recognition to identify and make estimates on the damage to cars. So it's like a auto repair shop of in UK, and they take pictures and they have an AI models built that basically come up with estimates like how much would it be. So like the user uploads a picture of its car and it comes back with an estimate of how much it would cost to fix it, right? And so for for an example like that, so you would have a base model where that base model has been trained with tons of, just basic sets of images, right? Like that would be common to that domain. Then there's the industry model where specific to automotive, let's say it's, automotive brands in the UK, right? So within the automotive industry, more specific. So that's like the second layer of the model. And the third layer of the model is the customer's original model, right? So the data that the customer has from maybe all the cars that they have, worked on before, maybe specific techniques that their experts use to identify their inferences. So IBM does not use any of that. Like it's never traded. If you were to say have another customer who would do that, that customer would not. We don't reuse data or training that was done for one customer for another. So that's.
So on the flip side,
Mhm.
if I want to create an app that looks at accident damage photos
Mhm.
and comes up with estimates,
Mhm.
I have to train it myself.
So again, it depends on what is made available. So as a platform, what IBM tries to do is it tries to make available specific. It pre-trains some models based on some domains where we see a lot of a lot of interest and activity based on customers. So there will be some training that the model will have that will come out of the box. But then in addition, like as part of the IBM portfolio, you'll have tooling that will let you then customize and train it for your specific application. So I think the answer will vary based on industry, but specifically for IBM and in the enterprise space, we absolutely do not believe in reusing data for other customers. Again, that's my, I flagged it as my opinion, but I would be surprised if there's any difference in the official position of IBM. So, so the building blocks, I'll cover a few of them. How many of you have used or just exchanged information with bots? So almost everyone, right, in some shape or form, or messengers that you have on Facebook or any other channel, right? So conversational assistants or bots, bots are really the more rudimentary form of it. These conversational assistants, especially, can have many sophisticated capabilities that are powered by these underlying machine learning and deep learning models that help you to, enhance your customer's experience or improve your employee efficiency. So, an examples of those use cases, and I'll come up with more detailed use cases later. But so that's like one part, right? Conversational assistants, where, as we discussed earlier, AI refers to the ability of a machine or software to converse in natural language, to understand and respond, and that's what that model does, but it's trained by many humans for it to be able to do that. The second one is, just think about in an enterprise, how much data exists everywhere, right? How much data exists in tons of PDF files that are around. If you have to pull up an insight, for example, when I was putting this presentation together, I have stared at these statistics like tons of times around, what's the market size, right? Like what's the market size for AI? And it keeps changing, maybe I last saw it in December, and based on the changes in the market, the numbers have gone up. So what did I have to do? I had to go and do a Google search, I had to compare it to make sure that the source was valid and, it was a number that I could quote. Now imagine that, there was a search engine that would let you do that as an employee, quickly fire it up, ask that question in natural language. Can I find the stats for the AI enterprise market and make sure that I can quote it in my presentation, or do I need permission? So that's the concept behind that AI-powered search, different from, say, just the generic Google search that you use on the web. You would be able to ask these questions in natural language and get answers. Image recognition, something that's very popular from the use case that I explained about that auto body shop that looks at images and comes up with forecasts on what that the repair cost could be. So it's about the underlying model looking at images. It has been trained on tons of images and it recognizes them because there has been work done where it was fed multiple images and there was some metadata created with some tags by training it. It's like I like the analogy that I'd come across some time back. Think of a little child traveling with you in a car, and the first time you show the car passing by and tell that child it's a car, the child grasps that concept. Now expand that, and the next time around, you tell it like, oh, that car is a Volkswagen. And the third time around. So as you keep on, so the more that child sees this, it starts, learning from it. You're not explicitly programming or providing instructions to the child, right? And so it's a similar case in the context of image recognition, that for the applications in the enterprise, like you train your image recognition models to identify many different things, whether that's say an crack in a window on a manufacturing floor, tag it, train it with tons of images, and then build solutions around it. And so that's, go ahead.
Is it fair to say that, obviously, the more data you have, better your model is going to be in general?
In general, that's absolutely correct. And you bring up a very, very interesting and valid point that I'll address shortly.
And so, if that's the case,
Mhm.
now I'm an organization leveraging like a Watson, AI model or whatnot. It's really, as an organization, my ability to scale data down specifically to a pipeline
Mhm.
to then leverage the model and get a response. Is that one of the biggest challenges for organizations today?
Absolutely, especially when it comes to learning from limited amount of data, especially in the context of enterprise use cases, is absolutely one of the challenges. You brought up a great point, because I have a slide that kind of talks about what are the challenges, and that's one of them. So you absolutely hit the nail on the head, that it truly is like one of the things. And so to keep up, to kind of go around that challenge, like there's research being done, there are algorithms being developed to see if you can learn from small amounts of data and provide accurate inferences. And the last one, which is around natural language understanding, again, it's like, train that machine learning model or AI software to understand natural language so that it can provide you the capabilities, whether it's like looking at a document, say it's a contract that you have for procurement, and you have trained that model to understand the different terms, highlight risks, and things along those lines. So these are sort of all the building blocks that are powered by the underlying deep learning machine learning models that then are composed into applications that go into the enterprise. So this is like a macro level view to your question about what do we do at Watson, right? And so I sort of try to abstract it independent of the IBM products, but my thinking around it is largely driven by what we do at IBM, right? So that orange bar that you see on the top are those pre-built services where the end, whether it's a developer or an end user of that chatbot, of that image recognition software, they don't have to play with the underlying machine learning model if they don't want to. And those are the pre-built APIs and apps that sit on the top, right? So below that, the green box here, that refers to the development environment. So that's where, instead of using, say, the off-the-shelf pre-built models that we referred to, if you have data scientists in your organization who want to work on machine learning models, maybe the open source machine learning models that are available, and build your own models, for that you require some kind of an IDE or a development environment to kind of build and train those models. Next to that, you need a runtime environment to kind of deploy these models into production. And then you need to have that model in production. Going back to my earlier example about, the Google app telling me to take a right, and let's say if I arrive late when I follow that path, that's not really a feasible option when it comes to, you know, the management of AI usage and outcomes in production, because, and I'll touch on this a little bit later, you need your results to be explainable. Like when you have a mortgage application that gets denied based on a model that you built, you need to be able to trace, like, why is it that you said no to them? You need to be able to explain that, you know, explain that to the end consumer. And you need to make sure that there are no biases built into your models. So there are, like, these are the kind of capabilities that you need in your platform to build AI at enterprise scale. The vast amounts of data that are getting generated, that needs, you know, there needs to be a way to discover it, there needs to be a way to catalog it, because if you are within the enterprise, you need a way to kind of figure out what data can you leverage for the applications that you build. And lastly, you might have different needs as an organization. You might be, you know, completely cloud-oriented, public cloud-oriented, because you feel completely comfortable with the benefits that public cloud brings. You might have a different technology stack, and you might want to or different compliance requirements, and you might just want to be on-prem, or you might require a hybrid approach that combines the two and uses containers of some sort to kind of bring you that option. And so these are all, at a macro level, the components of an AI platform. And as you can see, for the interplay of all these components to build applications, it's, you know, it's not an easy task, but it can bring immense value. So I kind of touched a little bit on this use case, but one of the common use cases, personally the one that I've worked on, is around customer care, right? So think of you requiring support. Now you have many devices, you know, engage with whether it's a shop, whether it's some other organization, you engage with them in many different channels. And so omni-channel support with, say, a virtual assistant like a bot is one key use case that can really provide answers without that call center being closed. The agent, let's say, is, you know, you are working with an agent, and in terms of like enhancing the productivity of the employee of an enterprise, capabilities like that insights engine can be connected to the chatbot. So let's say if you are chatting with that bot, and there are capabilities whereby your conversation will be handed over to a live person, right? Because you need more sophisticated support, and you can enable that agent, like that example. If I ask them, okay, so based on my, you know, specific requirements, what terms apply to me? That agent can use that insights engine to quickly pull up insights and look up through PDF documents and surface these answers very quickly. And lastly, another use case in the context of customer care transformation is that, you know, we all call into systems for IVR or interactive voice response systems, where you have to go through a menu-based option where you press 1 for getting a particular option, 2 for another. And the use of AI and conversational agent platforms can completely transform that, because using capabilities like speech to text, text to speech, you can just have an AI engine and a solution built on that can either take over that IVR or complement it. So I know I covered a lot of ground. Any questions before I proceed to the next section? Go ahead.
So I'm curious about, in the context of IBM, are you and your team building these tools for IBM Watson, or is this something where another company will come to IBM and say, we want to build a platform, a virtual agent platform out, can we pay you to do that for us?
Great question. So the IBM Watson AI and data unit, what we do is we build the blocks, right? So we build that assistant which will be trained in certain domains, and then we can have the customer like build those solutions for themselves, whether they can work with the services team that IBM has, or they could work with one of the partners that IBM has, like the Accentures, the Deloittes, etc. of the world, and help them build. Or they could have an in-house team that can do that. So we provide the building blocks and the tooling, as well as services teams that can do that for them, as well as work with them.
These are microservices that will be sold together, basically.
That's correct. So they are available either on on-prem or through the containerization effort as part of the hybrid cloud, or they are available on the public cloud. And also recently, IBM made its Watson services available on any platform, so they would soon be available on any platform of choice, cloud platform of choice for customers.
I have a question. So
Yeah.
customer care example,
Mhm.
like if there IBM has two different customers, say AT&T and Verizon,
Mhm.
they're using
Mhm.
similar services
Yep.
for customer care, like virtual agent, agent assistant,
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
voice agent. And IBM has a core model, like you explained 3 layers of model. So, in terms of the competitive advantage of those two companies or more
Mhm.
players in the
Mhm.
market, I mean, how much is the percentage that customers bring in from their model perspective? Like, if Verizon has 3 tiers of their consumers, they want to go,
Mhm.
they want each tier to go a different model. Similarly, AT&T wants
Mhm.
something similar. Does IBM, help service teams help build those custom solutions?
They do. Like there are like the global services team that exists in IBM, as well as we have some services teams that typically engage more along the proof of concept level projects. There are services teams that actually do that by working with customers. Now, in terms of specifics, like it will they can work with say the example that you gave. They could work with one or the other company. Obviously, there might be certain terms and conditions. I don't know because I'm not from the services organization in terms of like how they sign up with clients. If they work with direct competitors, that's more of a services question. But I think the approach again that I mentioned about a 3-layer cake of having a base model, an industry model, and a customer model, and like in terms of the guardrails, like we don't ever, we would never take that customer knowledge that we gained from or the data or the trained model and move it over to the competitor, because that would not be the right thing to do.
No, that's correct. So my follow-up question is like,
Mhm.
for example, McKinsey and BCG,
Mhm.
the consultants never discuss about price. Here, services team, for example, we can do price gouging.
Mhm.
Both the companies can increase the prices, and there are only 2 players. That's against FTC. But for AI, are there clear boundaries within services team for avoiding that to happen, or is there any FTC?
Sorry, I don't know the answer specific to, because it's a very intricate question. I really probably the best thing would be to connect you with one of the services
Sure.
people from IBM to get that specific answer. But I don't know the answer to that. Like how that's all. Any other questions? By the way, great questions, everybody.
So then just simply, Watson is the AI division of IBM.
That's right. Watson AI is part of this Watson Data and AI organization that focuses on AI solutions that typically target, say, the developers who build applications on top of it, like I mentioned, for our customers, partners, as well as other business units in IBM. And then we have the data division that works more on those IDE kind of functions. The one that I mentioned, like the one was for running models in production. So we have different parts of IBM within the data and AI organization that work on those solutions. Yeah, go ahead.
So does Watson also provide an ecosystem self-service platform for data scientists to do their own model training?
Absolutely.
Anaconda or Domino?
That's
something
correct.
like that?
So Watson has this IDE solution called Watson Studio, that basically where you can pull in
R Studio, this kind of.
yes, exactly. So all these data science models, and even like say if you want to use human annotators, and it connects to third-party providers that can take your model and do the tagging and all those functions.
And do you have access to all the open source models?
That's correct. So the specifics you can,
TensorFlow?
yeah. The specifics you can find out by just Googling IBM Watson Studio, but you can certainly find that there. Yeah.
It leads me back to data. Like, is there an upsell to access to a bunch of data that you can just pull down?
Sorry, I didn't follow your question.
So you have access to models, right? And the actual the logic behind it, but you have access to the data to generate further development of the model. Meaning, hey, I'm a small organization. I don't have scale. I want to leverage someone else's scale and pull it down and run it through the model.
So in this case, if you're talking about, say we have developed a model for a particular customer,
Yeah.
and there's another customer that perhaps does not have access to the same data that the first customer had,
Sure.
And are you asking if we would be able to transfer that data or something from that model over to that
Yeah.
second
What's the
customer?
intelligence, the patterns of somebody else?
So again, right, like I said, the governing principle for us is we don't reuse that data, we don't reuse that model. Now, there are certainly learnings that we develop, but that's a more technical, intricate discussion, and we don't use the data. We would certainly not make the data available from the first customer to the second. That's not the order.
So it has to be organic data that an organization has.
But there's tons of publicly available data sources, tons. And most people don't know about it. If you look at places.data.world,
Okay.
there's tons of government data that's available. Bureau of Labor Statistics has gobs of data. And you can pay people, private data providers, and collect market data. You can pay for it.
Yeah.
So data's out there.
Yeah.
But of course, if you want to have a competitive advantage, it's always best to have unique data.
Makes sense.
Yep. Alright. So if everything is looking good, there's so much money, there's so much interest, where are we with AI adoption today, right? And it's kind of interesting. So this was a survey that was done by O'Reilly in August 2018. And I think they had done a survey, if I remember, the sample was about 1,000 organizations worldwide. And what you notice is that, 48% of companies out there are just exploring, they're just looking. 36% are early adopters who have had models in production for about a couple of years, and only 15% have like 5+ years of experience of having models in production, right? They are integral to their business processes and systems. So as you can see, even with the interest, and even if it seems like it's 5 years, this is still very nascent, right? Like that's the key message that I would like you to take away from here. That, and if you look globally, like it's pretty much the same pattern everywhere. So what are the barriers to enterprise AI adoption? One of which I think we touched based on your question earlier, which was about, you don't have like tons of pictures. You have tons of pictures of cats that people have tagged, and you can recognize, frowning cat, smiley cat. I don't know, I'm not a cat person, but it's not that easy to find like a ball bearing on a production floor and millions of images of that to find that crack in that spot for you to identify that on the assembly line, right? So you need to have your AI models to be able to learn from the small amount of data that you have. To create AI solutions and products, you require deep understanding of the business domain, the business processes, and to your earlier question about doing that at scale for different companies, you need the right resources, right? Everywhere from like say the folks who might be the data scientists in that organization, to the IT folks, to the DevOps folks, like they need to have the required orientation, training, and philosophy, and that's hard, right? I mean, as you can see from the numbers that we saw, only 15% of organizations do this in production at scale. Data keeps growing, right? So even say in the context of an enterprise, let's just think about the number of, now that immense storage is available. I mean, there was a time when I had to clear my hard drive to get rid of, in say some previous companies, get rid of data to manage the size of data on my hard drive. These days, like who deletes attachments, who does anything? It's just like piles up, right? And think about like trying to, now if you had to build some hypothetical application for the enterprise, wherein to train models and you need to label that data. I mean, think about how hard that is. Finding labeled data is a hard problem. The other part is that building models and training them is not one and done, because your data is alive. You have customers who might change their opinions, you have new data coming in, and so the models that you have built up for predicting customer behavior, I mean, those models might fail if you have not kept up with like keeping on retraining them. And so all that is hard in many ways to do. The protection of data and insights is paramount, right? Like the principles that apply in a consumer space really don't work when it comes to enterprise data. Enterprises are risk averse. They don't want to, come up with something that potentially lands in the wrong hands. And so you need to have the security infrastructure for it. And something that I touched upon earlier, the decisions that you make, like in the case of that mortgage application, they have to be explainable, fair, and they need to be traceable. Like, which models did you use to come up with which decision? How did that change? What happened? What kind of data did you retrain it with? So all those are considerations that are absolutely critical when it comes to enterprise AI. So this is like a very macro level condensed view of, the kind of AI journey that I've seen organizations take. I assume these are the kind of folks that would fit in that 15% statistic. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question about the line on the last slide about models degrading immediately. What sort of best practices are there around ensuring that new data that would be relevant to the model continues to be fed into it?
So I think it's a longer discussion around the specifics of those practices, so maybe we can connect offline. But suffice to say, it's a criteria that you need to really look into. And it depends, at a macro level, it depends on your business model, right? Like how frequently does the business problem that you're solving, like how frequently does the data around that change, right? So the best practice around like how you retrain would really depend on that, right? Say for instance, something that has like a daily change, like I know I was talking to somebody who works in a particular industry, and they said that it's very frequent for them, like absolutely frequent. And I definitely think like some of the other cases, like say insurance or something like that, again, don't quote me on this one, I wouldn't imagine that it would be that frequent. So I think it just depends on the domain and the specific problem and how quickly your data, customer, or any other data changes. Yeah.
You missed that insurance quote joke you just made.
Say that again.
Never mind, it was a bad joke you made. I got a question. It was bad, never mind. So how close are we, do you think, to like, I really like what that quote's saying, which is like a lot of times it is, as you were saying, predict, like the results have to be explainable. And in your example of the red car, or a car with a dent, like the computer thinks too far advanced for a normal brain to say a shadow on a red car will automatically be a dent, but only on red cars. And so we don't think like that. We can't see it, or can it be explained? Is it just depends on how much data is in the data set that?
It just depends on how it's been trained. Actually, just going back to something that I had heard from one of our customers. So for example, that customer that was using Watson-based solutions for detecting body repair costs, they were saying that their results would vary going from, say, summer to winter, because the kind of pictures that customers would upload when they would take pictures of their accidents would vary in, they were much brighter and clearer, and so the inferences would vary. So I think it just depends. It depends on what you're trying to infer from, and also what your models have been trained over, right? And so maybe then you would potentially customize a model that does something different for different weather conditions, but it depends on that.
So then the model would say the only two differences in these two pictures are one is in summer and one is in winter, and that's why there's a difference. Or
in terms of the explainability?
I think so, yeah. I'm just like, I think that a lot of these models are getting too advanced, or they will, for a human brain to understand, and at a certain point, and you got to explain this to your customer or whoever your data set, and it's too far advanced for, or it's too complex at a certain point.
So again, right? It's like a balance between sort of concealing the complexity of what you're implementing, but at the same time increasing the explainability, right? And again, think about it, right? That communication of, say, why your mortgage was turned down is not made by some psychologist who's going to go sit there. It's going to be your frontline employee, right? So how do you enable that employee to explain that, right? So that's why like enterprise AI is hard. And thank you, by the way, for making me realize that that was actually a good quote about 85% of AI projects. That's what you're referring to, was it?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe it helps to, frame it as deep learning is a subset of machine learning. Well, what is the other stuff? Well, the other stuff is called statistical machine learning. And this is where you semi-domain knowledge, first principles here, okay? Like if you're modeling an airplane weight, and we know that drag increases as the cubic velocity, or coefficient of area, whatever. And it says it's squared, then you know that's wrong. Okay, that model's broken. That machine learning is not. But in deep learning, you don't get that. Okay, now there are some ways you can get some insight, like a map pointed out of that node, but it doesn't do the same things like any statistical machine learning node, where you can actually see the result and put the smell test. And then that's the big challenge, and the deep learning requires a lot more data, a lot. You can do statistical machine learning with relatively small data sets, sometimes like 100 points. You get a pretty good R squared, depending on how the data behaves. But machine learning, it takes vast amounts to do it well. And
Go ahead.
Oh, just kind of picking up, backing off of that.
Yeah.
So you were talking about cars getting dense in winter versus summer, and I know in your slide you had like a picture of a plant, and I'm wondering with the image recognition if the AI builds sort of like a 3D model of these types of things, or if you just have to feed it a ton of images under a bunch of different lighting conditions from, you know, close crops, far crops.
So there's there's nothing native to my understanding and knowledge that would enable the AI to just go ahead and build a 3D model, right? Like everything has to be built, configured, and trained. And so in that example that we had of, I think it was like a basil tree or plant or whatever, that was being tagged as a green plant and stuff like that. Like that model has been trained, probably a deep learning model that's been trained by showing it tons of pictures where the training data that was tagged to be basil, right? And so the same way, like in the context of that example that we discussed about dents, you know, is that really a dent or is that a shadow on a cloudy day on, you know, that inference would be drawn by perhaps training that machine learning model with more pictures of cars with dents taken during winter to train it to recognize those as dents or not dents, right? And so unless you build an application that helps you create 3D models of that, it's not going to do it on its own.
So it pretty much just sees pixels and then tries to figure out the features of those pixels, and you just have to have a huge data set.
At a high level of abstraction, yeah. All right, so going back to the discussion around the AI journey, think of it as like the high level best practices. So, you know, creating a solid, this time I'll not forget the code because it's a good one. So creating a solid AI product that provides, you know, customer, employee, operational or investor value is 40% problem and product definition, right? Like identifying the right problem to solve is absolutely key. And the organizations that have done well have really looked at it from a business perspective and figured out like which problem do you need to solve, right? Because you saw that in one of the charts, you had like tons of industries where you could potentially apply AI, right? But does that mean like if I am continuing with that, you know, auto body shop analogy, maybe I have tons of pictures that I get from my customers, but I don't really have data to come up with some, maybe my CRM system is broken, then prior and trying to come up with predictions around what can I upsell to my next customer, right? And so defining that strategy and business objective is absolutely key. You need a, you know, in that chart that I had where I was showing you what are the different components of an AI platform and the applications that get built on top of that platform, like having your data infrastructure in place and digital foundation in terms of the processes, whether it's, you know, for your employees, whether it's in terms of the tools and systems that you set up, that's absolutely foundational. One of the reasons we saw that only 15% have AI in production is because many times, many companies have experimented with pilots, but then they kind of don't know, right? Like their pilots might be in silos, like different departments went in and did a pilot for their particular thing, but they don't know how to integrate it into an actual business process. So it requires strategic thinking as well as looking at the capabilities that you have about how you select and deselect. It requires workforce transformation and change management. Like an example that I heard from one of the leaders at the services team at IBM was that they had gone and implemented a solution, did I think a POC, and then had great results. And then what they did was, like, what they found was when they put it, I think, in production, they saw that the performance never really increased initially like it should in the case of the POC. And so what that leader was mentioning was that what they realized when they audited what was happening was that the people who were supposed to, because again, we always view AI as not something that just happens in isolation. There's a human involved that's working with that AI to produce results. And the employees that were using that AI solution had reverted back to behaviors that were different from what were recommended for working with that AI. And so the results were impacted. So in this case, it wasn't the technology, but it was the people involved. And that's where change management and really, making sure that your resources, your people are trained to leverage these is a key practice that the successful organizations follow. And lastly, for, many organizations have follow Agile, and you need to make sure that you have that, adapted for AI specific requirements in the context of what you're trying to achieve. So these are sort of like the 30,000 feet view of the practices that I have come across. So I'm going to wrap up because I know, I'm hoping that since you guys are here, you guys are interested maybe someday to pursue something in AI and AI product management, because I think it's an amazing field. And as you can see, just based on those numbers, there's still much that can be done for a long time in this space. So I just wanted to give a few suggestions that I think you guys can check out if you are interested in this space. So the first one would be that, there are tons of resources. We are very fortunate, right? We have tons of resources, whether that's coursework, whether that's offline courses that are all available to us, right? So if you have interest and want to develop a passion for this field, check those out, right? There are really simple ones on Coursera and stuff that you can take. And I know IBM perhaps I think offers some as well. They're there for free. If this interests you and if you think that this is one field that you would like to check out, go check them out. It can be a few hours that you just spend on a weekend, and you really will develop foundational understanding of the field. To take it to the next level, in case of Watson, we make almost multiple of our services, if not all of them, especially in the context of Watson. We have free versions of them available where you just sign up, and if you want to play with it, either as a developer working on machine learning models or as somebody, sometimes you don't really even you don't need to code. So you can actually play with those services, and in the context of that image recognition example, you can take pictures that you have and just upload them and then see if it can tag it correctly and then maybe train it. So there's stuff that you can do and get hands-on with the space. I get my knowledge because this space is so dynamic. I get my knowledge about this space by really following a lot of people, by listening to podcasts, reading some academic papers just out of interest. But there are various ways you can, by the way, I don't know if, do we share this presentation with these folks?
We do.
So there are actually hyperlinks in all of these. So if you get it, you can check some out. But I gave you a subset. There are tons out there. And then if this is something that may interest you as a career to pursue, there are many details. There are many different roles depending on the organization that you can take up. Many different kinds of product roles. If it's a startup, maybe those roles will be clubbed together or maybe not. But something for you to explore to see what aligns with your interests, which industry. And lastly, talk to more people who do this if this interests you, because you can learn from them. I think that wraps it. Yep.
All right. We will have the opportunity to do more questions with the before you take this out, I've got a couple more slides here.
Okay, sorry.
So we do have some room left in our next Coding for Managers course. As of this slide was made earlier today, there are 5 spots left. They will start in April 1st, run through May 22nd. It's a night class from 5 to 7:30. Digital marketing also has some spots left. This one's Monday, Wednesdays. We also have a Saturday class for data analytics that's coming up. 4 spots are left there. I've asked them to add this to my slide deck, but basically, if you go to slideshare.net /product school. Let's see, can I do that on your machine?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see if we can bring this up. Keep Chrome?
Yeah, keep going.
Okay. I just wanted to bring this up on the slide, the slides here. Slideshare.net. Product school. Today's presentation will be uploaded by next Wednesday. But basically, matter of fact, you can see all of the presentations, all the product school courses that we do, and there are lots of these. My version of this looks a little different than this because it's not logged in. But you know, how to break into product, how to set up your product team for success, what early startup life is like, the beauty of product management, the intro to product management, building your product management toolkit. Some of these are ones we've done here in Austin. What is the anatomy of a consumer PM? How to execute like a PM rock star? So a lot of great topics. These things are a lot of good. Obviously, you're not going to hear the person give the talk. And some of the speakers have their own style. We've had a couple that have really graphics intensive ones, and they just talk to them. That's actually my style. I talk to my slides. So you're not going to necessarily get all of the text, but you'll certainly get a good idea of what this was like. And if you see that person show up again at a future meeting and you missed it last time, be sure to come to the next one. Any other questions we've got before we break out? We'll go ahead and tackle our speaker later. I'm sure there will be. Thank you all for coming. The next one is next month. We look forward to it. Thanks, guys.
So there's not one for the Austin-based community channel or?
I think there used to be one, but they, like I said, they reorganized all the slides.
Okay, in terms of things like, things like that was used in the general nationwide.
Well, there's a job. Yeah. Some people are like, I've got to be
That was the DSP.
Usually we get help set up, make sure that everything's
What were we asking about this?
He's already signed up. These guys just
IBM systems
So this is the first one. Manoj showed me this.
I just wish they had it once a level, like the hardware is
Well, we get all you guys.
level and all that stuff. Like that, I don't engage with it as well. Like, it's,
So
Where you guys
so
get from?
most of the responsibility, I guess,
Define
in
the
this
product.
organization is
so
basically
we
just
build,
kind of
we
like
define and build
getting
the
everybody
product. We're
oriented.
talking
Right,
about
you
the
define the product.
There's an event right
no,
now.
what I did was catching was we're talking about the hardware products, about say the data center.
No, like us, we usually have like, we have the design hardware, we have like software, and we put together become the product, right? Yeah, the system, yeah.
So, so what I'm saying is that I don't know the group that they might be working on the IBM systems.
The funny thing, yeah.
That's the group that kind of like, I was thinking more in the embedded software.
Do I need to mention that I got to go?
System.
Yeah. So just message.
We're not in the product design, we're in the marketing, what about you guys?
So, what team, sorry, marketing?
Yeah, the marketing, we're coming from the business, right, the business has a marketer,
Mention that to you on time.
what about you guys?
So, we.
Oh, you said I should message you.
Message,
Just let them know that I.
We have our own marketing organization, we have our own software, product organization, and all of these kind of together.
I just walked in the door.
But the hardware system seems to be from the background, might be something that. Years ago I had informed with them, but I don't know anything about them right now. Like, so for example, right, so there might be IBM data centers that we have them, and Watson is implemented as public cloud software on those data centers. But
Yeah, and I've been watching.
I don't know, like, who does the implementation, what are the requirements. I just know it from the point of view of provisioning, right? Like for putting a particular application out on a particular type of server, like what hardware do you need, what software do you need. I'm a little bit new.
But you role is like engage with a lot of different type of application customers.
I've worked with different kinds of customers, but I also work for for example, like different kinds of services, right? Like image. So I work with the product manager.
Yeah, I think
we are in the same organization, same team.
pretty much love it and
So
lost
when we
it.
build a solution, let's say for customer care, then I need to work with the image recognition to know what tone and how good that would be, or the natural language processing.
Not everyone goes
to
in there.
understand, like, okay, how good would that be? Like, would it be able to detect text in a particular language, right? So that's what I'm more on the software side.
Right, in NXT scale, I'm the product owner, like that's why marketing is the launch by asking me, okay, I can
So that's sort of a cross portfolio product owner because I work at the solution level. Sometimes solutions could be just one product.
I wouldn't say initial stage.
Nice to meet you.
Almost all of them.
Brad, nice to meet you.
So I desperately want to do what you do,
The initial.
either at IBM or maybe Smart Cognition.
We're a little bit more mature, but the initial.
Well, cool.
I love it. I mean, I'm all in. I studied data for a year. I decided data science is my cup of tea. And I'm into data. I love data, but I don't want to be a data
I
scientist.
am, but.
What's your background?
I'm an attorney. I have a JD MBA. I went to Harvard Law in New York for 5 years, and then I started a business in Silicon Valley. I'm just curious. I studied data science here at Springboard as a project manager,
And I like my product owner certification.
and I actually spoke to someone at IBM.
I mean, if I have, for example, the knowledge, whether
Jody
it's
Burks.
Level of difficulty.
She suggested a data science adjacent role, offering manager. And
so many
applied to couple of jobs at IBM, not getting any traction. I don't know if it's because I don't have BS or an MS. I don't know if you have any suggestions for getting in. And
I've had.
The top of my head, I especially like, there are some
I have
offer management
manager
tools
roles,
focused on politics of AI and
marketing
data
roles,
science, right? But I think like
that's fine, I'm getting paid.
but I don't know off the top of my head like any specific role. But one angle I think that would be
A lot of times